Ethan Reyes had long perfected the art of being invisible. As a single dad raising an 8-year-old boy on a janitor's salary, he learned quickly that silence was a shield and humility was a currency more reliable than pride. Every morning before dawn, he left their small apartment, tucked a blanket around his sleeping son, Mateo, whispered a promise that things would one day be easier, and took the first bus across the city to Vance Industries, the steel and glass empire that touched the clouds and ignored everyone beneath them. And Ethan didn't mind, or at least, he pretended not to mind. He needed the job, needed the insurance, needed the stability. So when he mopped the marble floors outside the 62nd floor boardroom and overheard billionaires congratulating themselves on bonuses that exceeded his entire lifetime earnings, he kept his head down and focused on the steady rhythm of the mop. On this particular morning, however, silence wouldn't shield him. Adrian Vance, the young CEO known for his ruthlessness, emerged from the boardroom mid-argument, his voice echoing off the glass walls like a blade thrown in anger. Behind him trailed his senior executives, trying to keep pace. Adrian's eyes swept the hall, and landed on Ethan. The billionaire slowed, jaw tightening at the sight of a janitor wiping the polished floor he'd paid a small fortune to install. "Move," Adrian snapped. "You're blocking the path." Ethan immediately stepped aside, offering a polite nod. But Adrian wasn't done. He scoffed loudly, gesturing at Ethan as if he were a stain on the floor. "This is what HR thinks passes for staff these days. A janitor doing cleanup in front of the board. Unbelievable." A few executives chuckled, hoping to curry favor. Ethan didn't respond. Years of military discipline, buried beneath his quiet exterior, taught him not to react. But one person didn't laugh. A pair of small brown eyes peeked from behind the CEO's leg. A little girl, no older than 7, clutching a sketchbook to her chest. Lily Vance, the CEO's daughter. She stared at Ethan with an expression so full of silent apology that his heart softened despite the sting of humiliation. Ethan offered her a gentle smile. It was all he could offer. As they walked away, Ethan resumed mopping, breath steady, movements calm, but something inside him felt heavier. Not because of Adrian's insult, he'd heard worse, but because his son had started asking why his dad looked tired every night. Why grown-ups treated him like he wasn't worth seeing. Why he worked so hard, yet life stayed so hard. Ethan always said the same thing. Because some jobs aren't about pride, they're about purpose. And today, he reminded himself of that again, until the fire alarm shattered every thought. A piercing siren erupted through the hallway, followed by panicked shouting from security. Fire in the CEO's private lab. Evacuate. Smoke curled under a steel door at the end of the hall. Executives scattered in terror. Guards radioed frantically, but Ethan didn't hesitate. Instinct burned through him like a switch flipped back on. He sprinted toward the smoke, grabbing the emergency respirator on the wall, slipping it over his face as he pushed through the heat that clawed at the air. Inside the lab, flames licked along the walls, sparks erupted from shattered equipment, and the acrid smell of burning wires filled the space. But what froze Ethan was the sight near the center. Adrian Vance lay pinned beneath a heavy metal beam that collapsed from the ceiling, coughing violently, barely conscious. "Hold on," Ethan shouted. Adrian's eyes flickered open, shock filling them at the sight of the janitor running toward him instead of away. Ethan shoved debris aside, bracing himself before lifting the beam. Muscles strained, sweat burning against the rising heat, but he lifted it. Not with the strength of an ordinary man. With the strength of someone who had once carried wounded soldiers through collapsing buildings. Adrian gasped as Ethan dragged him free, pulling him toward cleaner air. But as Ethan bent to check his breathing, stabilizing his airway, his sleeve rolled back, revealing the tattoo on his forearm. A black falcon with a lightning strike through the wing. Adrian's eyes widened even through the haze. He knew that symbol. Everyone in the upper echelons of government knew it. Falcon Unit. The elite military rescue division so secretive that most people thought it was myth. Every member was believed killed in a covert mission 6 years ago. But the tattoo wasn't just a rumor. It was real, and it was on the arm of the janitor he had just insulted. Ethan didn't notice Adrian's stare. He simply lifted him onto his shoulder and carried him out through the flames just as the sprinkler system burst to life, drenching everything in heavy rain. By the time security stormed in, Ethan was kneeling beside Vance, checking his pulse, giving precise instructions with a calm authority that silenced everyone around. Adrian tried to speak, but the world blurred to black. His last thought before losing consciousness wasn't the fire. It was the tattoo, and the realization that he had insulted a ghost, one who had survived what no one else did. Part 2. Hours later, Adrian Vance awoke in a stark, quiet medical suite inside his own building. His throat burned, his chest ached, and his mind replayed flashes of smoke and falling beams. But when his vision cleared, the first thing he saw was Ethan sitting in a chair in the corner, hands clasped, gaze distant. His forearm, and the tattoo, were fully visible now. For the first time Adrian could remember, he felt small, human, vulnerable. "You," Adrian croaked, voice raw. Ethan stood, holding out a cup of water without expression. "Drink slowly," he said. Adrian obeyed, staring at him like he was trying to decipher a ghost story. "That tattoo," Adrian whispered. "It can't be. Falcon Unit didn't have survivors." Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked out the window for a long moment before replying. "Some of us walked away," he said quietly. "Walking away isn't the same as surviving." Adrian felt the weight of those words settle heavy in the room. Falcon Unit was legendary, known for impossible rescue missions and the soldiers who risked everything for civilians. If Ethan was one of them, then the man he'd mocked wasn't a janitor with a mop. He was a hero who had once walked through hell for strangers. Adrian swallowed hard. "Why are you here?" Ethan glanced at the door, as if expecting someone to interrupt. "Because my son needs stability. Structure. A life without fear that his father won't come home. I left the battlefield to give him that." The simplicity of it stunned Adrian. Men like him hid behind power, lawyers, polished walls. But this man, this quiet, steady, unseen man, had carried burdens Adrian couldn't begin to imagine. Before he could say another word, the door creaked open. A small figure peeked inside. Lily. She tiptoed into the room, clutching a card covered in colorful crayon drawings. She looked at Ethan with awe. "Thank you for saving my dad," she whispered. Ethan softened, kneeling beside her. "You're welcome, sweetheart." She handed him the card. On the front was a drawing of a man with wings pulling another man out of a fire. Ethan blinked hard. Lily smiled shyly, then slipped back out. Adrian exhaled shakily. "Ethan, I owe you everything. And I owe you an apology." Ethan nodded once, not accepting it, simply acknowledging it. Adrian stood from the bed, wincing slightly. "You saved my life. And you saved my daughter from losing her father. I can't repay that, no matter what I offer." Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Saving people, that part of me doesn't go away." "Maybe not," Adrian said. "But I can change the part one can control." He stepped closer. "You don't belong on a mop, Ethan. Not after what you've done. For this country, for my company, for me. I want you on my team. Not as janitor, as head of corporate safety and crisis response." Ethan blinked, stunned into silence. Adrian wasn't finished. "You'll have a team, full benefits, housing assistance, a salary fitting your skill. And more importantly, respect." Ethan looked down at Lily's drawing in his hands, the crayon wings and flames swirling in colors of innocence. He thought of Mateo, of the future he wanted to build, of the years he'd spent shrinking himself to survive. And for the first time since leaving the military, he felt the possibility of rising again, not as a soldier, not as a ghost, but as a father creating a life worthy of his son. Slowly, he stood. "All right," he said, voice steady. "Let's build something better." Adrian extended his hand. Ethan took it, and as their palms met, the ghost of Falcon Unit stepped into the light, not to fight, but to live again.